Like most students, you probably find it difficult to use the alto scale because it seems too theoretical and complicated. But if you don't start with that and instead think of it as a way to go from phrases that sound like this to also have the option to play this beautiful sound, then that's a much better starting point, and that is how you want to learn it, as a sound. In fact, many things get easier if you approach them like that, as you'll see in this video. We're used to learning new things by first analyzing and understanding it and then using that to internalize it. And that's great if you're trying to learn Excel or you want to cook from a recipe. But when it comes to music, then starting with music theory is just not that efficient. But I'm going to fix that in a bit and show you some examples of Wes Montgomery and Joe Pass using the alto scale. The problem is that it's not music when I'm describing it with numbers and letters, so instead it's probably better to find some examples and listen to how it actually sounds. For that to work, we need to place them in a context because they don't just appear as isolated things. Alto dominants are mostly used as dominants that resolve. So for the D7, it is a D7 that resolves to a G chord, which is great news because you can then use it in a 2-5-1 and use the 2 and the 1 to add some context to how it sounds. A D7 alto chord can be a dominant with a flat 13 and a flat 9. So that sounds like this. And you probably want to compare this to the same progression with a chord that doesn't have those altered extensions. The thing you want to listen for is that there's less movement going from chord to chord. I'll get back to that in a bit, but notice that more notes are just staying the same, going from A minor to D7 and from D7 to G. It really is that simple. Another example that you want to hear could be a D7 with a flat 5 and a sharp 9. And here I'm also moving a few of the voices within the chords. You want to try to play the chords and really listen to them. Maybe move them into songs that you already know, which means transposing them to another key maybe, but that's really gonna tell you what they sound like in the context. Even if that means that you're playing it and you can hear that it doesn't fit, then at least you learned that about the alto dominant in that song. But of course you also want to figure out how this works in solos. Let's start with this way of playing the D alto scale. And again, putting it into the context of a 2-5-1 really helps to hear how it sounds. And here it's also useful to compare this to a similar 2-5-1 without the alto dominant. Like this, you start to hear the alto dominant as a sound. See if you can hear how this example sounds similar to the other alto dominant lick. The alto dominant is a way to create outside tension on the song, and it is practical because it's a tension that is easy to resolve using the strongest connection that we have in harmony. Dominant to tonic. But how do you solo over it? And what do you play if the sheet music says D7 alt? As you already saw, then the scale can be played like this. One exercise that can be great to begin to get the sound into your ears is again leaning more on the chords. Listen to how each note in the alto scale resolves when you move from the dominant to the tonic. I'll go over it quickly, but maybe try to play it for yourself and really listen to it. That's much stronger than just watching a video on YouTube. The root of the dominant is pretty simple because the D kind of just stays and becomes the 5th on the G major 7. Now the flat 9, the E flat, just wants to move down to the 5th, so that's going down to D. The sharp 9 is a little bit more vague, but actually that wants to go down to the 5th as well, and usually does this through the flat 9. So the 3rd, F sharp, just moves up to become G, and the flat 5 wants to move up to the 9th, A. The flat 13 wants to move up to the 3rd, B, and the flat 7, C, just wants to move down to the 3rd, G. Let's figure out how to make some licks and talk a bit about how Wes and Joe Pass use alto dominants in their solos. If you spend all your time practicing scales, then you're doing it wrong. So while it's worth it to figure out how the different notes of D altered resolve, then you're better off relying on the fact that the scale is also E flat melodic minor. And if you practiced that and checked out the diatonic arpeggios and triads, then you can use that for D altered as well. It's already in your fingers. And I'll actually show you an example of how Joe Pass really is thinking like that as well. If you want to play solos using the alter scale, then you probably don't want to only play lines that are just running up and down the scale. That's incredibly boring. And if you're exploring the alter scale, then you probably already know how to make lines using arpeggios. For E flat melodic minor, you have these diatonic chords. E flat minor major 7, F minor 7, G flat major 7 sharp 5, A flat 7, B flat 7, C half diminished, and D half diminished. But here you kind of run into a problem, because in the E flat melodic minor scale, there's no D7 arpeggio. And if you try to use the D half diminished arpeggio that you do have, then that sounds pretty weak and it's very difficult to use. Now you can use most of the arpeggios, but there are two that are easier to start with because they just immediately connect with the D7 and sound like that chord. If you look at the D7 chord that I played earlier in the video, then the top part of that chord is a C half diminished. And that is a diatonic chord in E flat melodic minor. So that's a great place to start, already with the arpeggio up, scaled down. The reason this works is that it contains both the C and the F sharp. So really just the core of the chord. And of course then we also have a flat 13 and a flat 9, just to really give us some of the alter sound as well. The other arpeggio that you can use that also contains C and F sharp is A flat 7. But it is as important that you keep checking out licks and analyze those to get ideas and to get exposed to how others use the alter dominant. Besides the diatonic arpeggios, there are a few other very common devices that really nail the alter sound, and some of them are only 4 notes. Wes demonstrates one in his solo on Yesterdays, even if he plays it an octave lower than what is most commonly used. This is A7 altered, so the scale is of course B flat melodic minor, and I see this as built around a B flat minor triad. If you play this an octave higher, which is also a very common way to use it, then you can also see how it is kind of built around an A7 chord voicing. And of course I see this as built around this voicing, which is an A7 with a flat 13 and a sharp 9. The most common 4-note phrase that Joe Pass uses really a lot is in this example. It's really just a minor triad with an extra note. Again, A7 altered. These licks also show you the connection to the melodic minor scale, and a few bars later in that same solo chorus, Joe Pass makes that really clear with this D7 altered lick in the turnaround. It's just an E flat minor triad. So it's clear that Joe Pass is also really thinking from E flat melodic minor when he's approaching alter dominance. I very often get asked about what D7 alt means, what chord that is.
I don't understand.
And surprisingly, it's probably the most honest way to write a chord symbol. You can kind of have any combination of flat 9, sharp 9, flat 5 and flat 13 in there. So you can't read D7 alt and then immediately just turn that into a specific grip. But that's also closer to how we actually play jazz or how we interpret chords. Because most of the time we don't really think of extensions and alterations, but just more of the basic chords and then whatever added notes that make sense with how the chords are played. So if you see A minor 7 to D7 alt to G major 7, then you could play. But you could also play the dominant like this. And it's very important that you start thinking about chords like that so that you're not stuck with grips that you can't turn into music because they don't really fit together. Jazz harmony is just so much more fun once you start to unlock that approach and work with categories of chords. This is very close to how Joe Pass thinks about chords. And I talk about that in this video, which will help you get rid of that grip limitation and help you be free when you're playing the chords. It's really going to change how you play. Learn jazz, make music.